Here's a sample win-loss report. This is from what we do here. So we assess across those 5 factors: engagement factors, offer factors, product factors, brand factors, demand factors. We do some nice graphics of the quantitative stuff. And then, of course, 2 layers of executive summary. The too long didn't read one for the execs is just going to give the 1 line. And here what we're trying to do is say, what do they see as positive? What do they see as negative? I'll put these links up at the very end while we have the chat here. This is a little piece of graphics that we use. So oftentimes what we ask when we initiate an interview, and something you might want to consider as well, is first of all asking the sales guy, why do you think we lost? And you ask them across those 5 factors. And we do something a little bit nuanced here, which is quite useful and you might want to consider about it. We ask not only if a factor contributed towards an outcome, for example, the loss here, we also ask, did a factor detract away from the outcome? So a customer might say, hey, listen, we really liked your pricing despite the final loss. Or we really didn't like your brand and reputation despite the final win. So we're asking to score on 2 scales here. Before we go to questions, my website here, steelpointresearch.com, tons more research and videos and thoughts and opinions and all that sort of stuff. Knock yourself out, great stuff there. And then finally, just before we go to questions, some QRs to the sample win-loss report and quickery codes to the template win-loss survey. Please help yourself. Of course, they're available on our site as well. And I think that brings me to 10:34, maybe a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, if anybody wants to unmute and ask questions, you can do so. Well, I mean, it was a very good presentation. I'm curious though, B2B, usually on the buyer side, there's more than one decision maker. Maybe there's only one decision maker, but there are a lot of influencers. How many people, how many individuals do you typically survey or interview?
Sometimes it can, depending on the size of the transaction, it's a great question. Sometimes it can be just one, the guy who finally made the decision. And we wanted to sing, it's not the guy who rubber stamps, it's the guy who finally made the decision. Sometimes it can be multiple more. You know, I've never seen more than 5 or 6, to be honest. But there we're trying to get a sampling of some of those various other people. That's spot on. Yes, you might have multiple people in that particular.
Yeah, and I understand, you know, and it rings true when you say you don't send the salesman in or salesperson in to do the thing. You send somebody else who's maybe more disarming. Is that where? Is that why people hire? Well, part of the reason they would hire somebody like you is because you've done this before and you know what to ask. But is it also because you're an external people, so the customers are going to be more forthcoming? Do you think
we're independent, and that actually brings a lot of credibility to say, listen, in fact, what we ask in our when we, you know, people order from us and we send them an email and say, look, send this email to the end customer, here's a hyperlink to the survey. But what we want to say is, listen, we're not involved in the process. This will be my client. We're not involved in the process from here on out. It's just all you. And that's the sort of one of the phases of the disarming process, to try and get to elicit those honest and candid responses. And it's very powerful.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, I've got one other top tip here, and it's something for you all to be important. Many people want to do this. I'm going to tell you what your number 1 barrier will be. If you want to do win-loss, and maybe you're doing them already, and I'm going to say this with the greatest respect because I've worked with this group of people my entire life. Your number 1 barrier typically is field salespeople. They do not want you to do this. And in fact, oftentimes that's my number 1 barrier. And frankly, you know, because I know a lot of them, I know them well. When I get them around a table and pre-COVID put a few beers in them, the answer is this: you know, I don't want you involved for 3 reasons. 1 is, this is something I'm meant to have known already. 2, you might well uncover things, and I don't know what you're going to uncover, and that really worries me. And 3, it actually suits me to be in control of the one-loss narrative. This is just life. This is a matter of fact. And so to be successful in this, you can't appeal. Unfortunately, I won't say all of them, but many field salespeople, you can't appeal directly to them. You have to go higher and you have to keep on top of them. If you leave it up to field sales guys, you ain't ever going to get that intro for those 3 reasons. And unfortunately, I say that with the greatest respect and fondness for enterprise salespeople, that's the reality.
So Will, just a question. Normally when you get engaged, or is it typically that the sales team is the one doing the win-loss analysis if it's being done?
Yeah, almost always when you see win-loss done, and it's really not done as much as you might think, it's typically win-loss reason codes in the CRM system. And they're asking that on the way out. Look, sales guys, they're not incented or motivated to do deep dive win-loss. They're already thinking about the next deal. Generally, what they want to do is get a plausible win-loss code into the opportunity so they can close it out. So more often than not, yes, it's them doing that, if they do it at all. But that's typically who's doing it.
Okay. And do you work with customers that actually drive this out of product?
Absolutely, yeah. It's either senior product or senior sales. Senior salespeople, I mean, SVPs of sales want to know why they're winning and losing just as much as senior product as well. So I've had situations where product guys have said, look, I need some kind of ground softening before I send in my product managers to do that roadmap review. And win-loss is a really great way to do that, right? Sales guys say, listen, I got to make my number next quarter. I need to find out where are we going wrong, where we're doing great, where we're doing wrong. So that's usually the two senior constituents that sponsor my work.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. So ProdPad's this, we are a mix of like self-service and enterprise kind of sales, and I actually do sales and success for the organization. But how do you marry up with a win-loss, what they tell you in something like this versus how they're using our like free trial or like the product that we're giving them to experience and actually put their data in, and they get through that whole process and then they churn or they never buy? How do you like connect that actual quantitative actions and behaviors that they took with your product with the qualitative research that y'all are getting out of it?
That's a good question. So what we do is win-loss discovery, and that's a bit like the blood work here. So imagine when you get the blood work done, right? We're not doing the deep diagnosis. This is a 30 to 45-minute discussion with the customer. We were asking to get that initial sentiment. So one of the things we do ask is, what was the demo experience? Did you enjoy that? Did you feel as though it was tailored for you? What was your opinion of the product? We'll ask all those sort of questions, but we're not deep diving into sort of user behavior. Did you click this button? Did you click that button? That's not what win-loss is about. It's getting that initial sentiment. Think of that initial blood work, and then it goes to your specialist. It goes to your cardiologist who's going to do the deep dive on what all those words mean. So we're kind of like the specialists in and out, particularly in our business.
Yeah, well, it's like I've heard some things where our lost customers will say, "Oh, well, your product didn't have this," or like I used it and it didn't meet this need, but then they actually didn't. You can actually see from the usage data they didn't even go into that section of the product, and so that gives us more insight around like the marketing and the positioning and the messaging that we've done without them actually, so them knowing what is available.
And that's a perfect example of the problem we're going directly to customers is they don't want to offend you. Because they like you and they like your product. That was all right, right? But I don't want to offend you. So the easy answer is, it didn't have some obscure feature X. It didn't have a button here. They're easy answers to give. They're non-confrontational because I don't want to hurt your feelings. And then that often does happen. And it's interesting you find they didn't actually even press that button. And that just shows you they're making it up. I wouldn't say lying, that's harsh, but they're softening it. They're sugarcoating it.
Yeah, I mean, I do that. I mean, I'm on the other side. I get these surveys a lot. First of all, you say open questions. And I want to help these people out, but answering an open questions is very time consuming for me sometimes and emotional labor. Whereas just checking a box, it's a lot easier. So I know that's not what you want to hear, but that's the truth.
That's reality. And look, our success rates is about 80% of win-loss interviewee targets complete the survey. And then about 80% of those go on to take the interview. So we're not 100%. No, some people are just saying, like, I don't have the time for this. Yeah. But if you could couch it right and say, listen, come on, we spent 6 months with you. Can you just give us 30 minutes of your time? Your opinion's so important. That's like goes a long way to stroking a bit of ego and maybe getting a more favorable response. But some people just say, no, I'm moving on with my life.
Will, just one question. So my company does a lot of business through channels. So, we don't primarily do direct business. How do you deal with that where you've actually got a reseller or an IHV in between you and the customer?
Yes, that's more complex, absolutely. And I'm actually working on a deal in Europe right now that's got exactly that problem, is you have to go in with the permission of the partner. You can't do this outside of the partner. The partner has to know this, and you have to agree that you're going to go there. And you also need to both brace yourself. There's going to be feedback which may reflect badly on you and reflect badly on the partner as well. So the answer is, conceptually it's no different. The requester just happens to be two entities. But you can't sort of do it round the back door. I mean, that would destroy partnership relationships completely.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, I don't. And we have a few minutes if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, well, hey, this is Tim. Just got a question for you. You know, this is something that I'm kind of curious about. I don't know if you had a chance to talk about it already, but kind of, you know, you lose customers along the way, like in the very beginning during the sales process. You could also lose them kind of like 3 months in. They decide, hey, this is not great for us, just like Wes mentioned. But like, does your approach and the types of questions in your survey differ based on kind of where they're lost?
Generally, we're pressing on those five categories always, regardless of where it's lost. You know, the deeper into the sales cycle they go, the more successful you are going to be securing that interview. But no, the approach doesn't change. I still want to know, why did you cut bait on my client? That's really what I want to do. And what's really fascinating is sometimes you find that people actually lost way earlier in the sales cycle. So I got a video on my site which talks where the company lost at the RFP phase. It was done. It was all over for them, but they were kept in for the next 4 months as a stalking horse in terms of pricing. And they actually lost. And the reason why they lost the RFP, which is just bizarre, well, not bizarre, but you know, we'll all smile about it, is the RFP response. The end customer would say, give me one PDF with all these answers. My customer had got like multiple different emails from different departments. They were all bombarding the customer at the same time. And the customer said, look, you say you're all about the customer. You couldn't give me one PDF like I asked. You had to give me 6 emails. You were done at the RFP response, but you had a reputation. So I kept you in till the end of the quarter so I could beat the crap out of the guy who actually ultimately won on price. And that was revealed in a win-loss interview that I did. They would never, ever tell my customer that, but I managed to weak it out of them, as it were.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But listen, folks, am I in 10:45? Oh, we've got a few more minutes. Is it 10:55?
Yeah. Well, you know, if people want to drop off, they can. I tell you what, I put a link in the Orange channel on the Slack, so that's a link to our survey. Now that has both a 1 to 10 rating and an open-ended question. So that's how that survey is designed. But this would be feedback for Will, and you know, we do this for all the session leads. So please fill that out. And I guess there's Will's email is here on the screen. So if you want to contact him offline, you can do so. And yeah.
Good.
I guess the next session starts at 11:55. So.
All right. Well, I've got a few minutes. If anyone wants to kick around and ask questions, I've got nothing to do.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave this open if people want to hang out. But otherwise, you know, at 11:55, somebody else will come in.
All right. Thanks, guys. Let me ask actually, anyone on the call now, do you do win-loss now? And how do you do it? Anyone's left listening?
It looks like Jay dropped off. I know Jay does it, or I think he does. But
well, this is Erica Chi. I'm a director of product here, but yeah, it's really interesting. I've been trying to get buy-in to do a more formal win-loss analysis, but yeah, I think what you said, it falls in the priority scale just because we lack a lot of resources and you know, it just never bubbles up to the very top. So it's really interesting, but I do think that there's more barriers, right? Is maybe there's a culture of not really wanting to know the answer.
Yeah. That could be it. I mean, if it's important, you'll make it a priority. But I mean, that's what led me to start this company. Is it should be easy. It shouldn't be complex contracts. So with our site, you submit your win-loss interview. We send you the executive summary. If you want to buy it, buy it. If you don't, you don't. And that's pretty much what we do. And it's just like then the reason of we don't have the time is evaporated, right? Because you know all we're doing is you're outsourcing that entire activity.
Yeah.
And our price point is $750 per interview per report. We put it on our website on the homepage. So then pricing doesn't even become discussion either. I mean, like, that's rounding error in the grand scheme of things. But really, you're out of excuses when you end up at my door. Honestly, you've got no more excuses. Where I personally, my own win-loss, and I do win-loss, not on myself, I actually have some independents do it, is I trip up when it gets down to the field sales guys. Once it gets them, more often than not, they're not sending that win-loss interview unless someone is on them to do it.
But Erica, why do you think your company is resistant? Is it just inertia? They just never done it in the past, or is it
Yeah,
cost? What is it?
I think there's like a little bit of we know why, it's like we already know why, so we don't need the validation or yeah, it's just it really does come down to culture, and it's been really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough. And what do you use now, Erica? Is it just win-loss codes in the CRM system, or do you have something more
Yeah, I
formal?
mean, if that, because like, and to be fair, we're a pretty small startup, and it's just this year that we actually now have a sales team. And so I think if there's ever been a chance to do something more formal, it's probably now. And so it would be interesting, maybe, Will, if we can talk offline and just see, okay, so how do you sell this in a way that doesn't come off as defensive, And I mean, it could be, yeah. I mean, there is that fear factor, right? That we don't really want to know,
Cool.
or we're not prepared to have that conversation.
That's a tough one, but I mean, in the context of business, it's one of the pieces of business that's emerged for us actually recently is board reporting. So we actually appear in some board decks now because the board really wants to know why you're winning and why you're losing.
Right.
There's not more, you don't get a more sort of authoritative mandate than coming from the board of top five won deals, top 5 lost deals every quarter. We want to see win-loss interviews on that. But yeah, it's tricky. If you're fearful of the results, I mean, the medical analogy works perfectly. If I don't want to go and find out what's wrong with me, I ain't going to the doctor. I mean, that's the reality. It's a tough sell. But I mean, I guess I'd ask you is, you might ask the question, when was the last time we lost because of sales engagement, because of quality of sales engagement? And then the answer might be, well, never. And then you might say, well, do you think that's really the case? I mean, is that never lose because of sales engagement ever? I mean, it's a bit provocative, but
Yeah.
Well, even if that is true, it just seems like your marketing people and product people this seems like a core thing for what they do. They have to know ultimately. I mean, this is part of knowing what the customer wants and how are you going to drive your product in the future.
100%. Yeah. It's been a journey.
it is true. But oftentimes you get people looking at competitors, or they look at the analysts. I mean, they listen to the sales guys around the sales table at the end of the quarter. And that's what we use for our data sources, oftentimes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate
No,
it.
you're more than welcome. Thanks very much. All right, folks, I'll drop now, and I guess stand by for your next session.
All right.